welcome back to the Sounds of the Baskerville. Chris, good to see you, Chris.
Good morning, James. Good to be back.
Well, it's great to have you here on this 50th episode of the Sounds of the Baskerville.
Wow, who would have thought we'd make it this far?
Make it this far. If only we'd known in the very beginning that we'd survive to 50. But anyway, so 50 episodes. So when you think back to why we sort of started this was to try and pull out some of the 2,000 different examples of what to do and, more importantly, what not to do when your business is facing a cash flow crisis or some sort of problem like an insolvency or a solvency event or something's gone wrong. I think what we wanted them to do was to phone you sort of first, not to wait till the very last minute when it was all too late. Yeah,
it's funny. Is one of our PR ladies that works really closely with our firm. I was just lamenting on a story to her, and to us, that's our norm. Like our normal every day is this particular story. The way she looked at it and went, "That's the most craziest, wild thing that she's ever heard of." And I said, "But that's just our normal." And then it sort of clicked for her. We've got to get these stories out of your head and onto paper.
Yeah, and it's been a fascinating. So I think if you think back through the 50, we've had the white shoes on the sand with the environmental disaster looming.
Yeah.
We've had the mad scientist running in a banana plantation.
Yeah.
We've had a whole lot of trucks, but no one knew where they were or who owned them. We've had the principal of your firm, Brad Morelli, came in. The principal of First Among Equals managing partner of the firm.
That's
from
right.
Josh Sutherland. He was relating to when he was catching a bloke throwing things into a skip bin and spent the afternoon trying to get the records out. So we've had some fascinating stories of how people have got themselves into trouble or asked you to fix it up. Now imagine that if you're the person who's listening into the Sounds of the Baskerville, some of these crazy stories are your day job.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
that's the amazing part about it. And it's not until you sort of step outside your own sphere of influence that you live in and you look back with objective eyes, you go, actually, now that I think about it, that is actually a pretty crazy story.
Yeah. And that's kind of the Chris Baskerville life is a series of, as we go back to the Lemony Snicket's episode, a series of unfortunate events that you sometimes have to try and sort of unpick. So if you think back over the 50, have you noticed anything that's changed over the time when we've sort of been doing these? Have you sort of, we sort of started, COVID was sort of coming along and then things got progressively worse and then we had lockdowns and lock-ups and open-ups and that sort of thing. What have you seen?
Directors make the same mistakes over and over and over and over and over again. And you see this common pattern of some of the decision making and the mistakes they make, and it's quite common. So what might be uncommon to them as a director is quite common to us as insolvency practitioners. But what the pandemic caused people to do is really good business operators had to change. And they didn't have to probably even change some of them had to change their products, some of them had to change their services, but they had to change the way they did business. And a lot of people got caught out with the inability to, everyone hates this word, but pivot. But people had to pivot. We had to pivot. We had to seriously rethink about how we were going to do business. One of the things that caught everyone, particularly in professional services, didn't catch everyone, but did catch a few people out, is the inability to work remotely from the office.
As in that they weren't structured to be able to take advantage of technology because they'd never either hadn't thought about it, didn't want to previously, didn't trust the workforce to actually do any work if they couldn't see them.
That's right, yeah. Okay. And what comes to mind is a law firm in Brisbane who shall remain nameless, but all their infrastructure was centralised in an office. So that meant that the workforce had to come into the office in order to access the data and centralised information, and that's fair enough. You want to protect privacy and all that. But it conflicted with the bounds of the law telling everybody don't come into the office and you must work from home because everyone's in a lockdown. So how do you deal with this conundrum between you need to get the work done, but you can't be in the office to access the information to get the work done.
And companies have been told about these kind of business risks for years. And I think what we keep on hitting on in this fascinating walk through the 2,000 or so examples is, as you say, they're often a problem that's the first time the directors encountered it, but it's not the first time you've seen it. It's just, it's the first time I think if I only ever watched the Ally McBeal show occasionally. And someone said to Ally McBeal, why are your problems more important than anybody else's? And she said, because they're mine. And you just sit there and go, so I suppose maybe that's the thing, is like, it's how long have we been talking about just take a look. If there's a problem, tackle it. But we're Australians and we often talk about the Australian way and stuff. Sit there.
She'll be right.
She'll be right. We'll just, there used to be able to that. You remember that souvenirs used to sell around to it? It was a little coin. And said, if I'll get that, I'll get around to it. So you could give a person a round to it so they'd actually get around to it. But anyway, so maybe like we were talking before that in previous episodes of perhaps of late, not getting around to it, being forced to pivot, like we were all forced to pivot. And you've done some great examples of where people have pivoted, and you bloke who was selling car spaces and goes into some other different business. We had some great people who are that savvy, that able to try to switch around and change the the way that they run their business. But then there's the rest of us who kind of just plodded along, did the best they could. There's a bunch of people who just stored the problems and kicked the can down the road. And there's a bunch of people who took Cash Flow Boost and JobKeeper and sort of thought, okay, well, that's kind of, in fact, actually kind of pushed the problems further down the road. Do you reckon the rise of the DPN has made the only big difference that you've seen of late?
Yeah, well...
Director's penalty notice?
Yeah, well, if you're looking at the latest insolvency data that's just coming out now, we're in October 2022, the pre-pandemic winding ups and court activity was obviously very high, and then particularly from the ATO, and then as soon as the pandemic comes in 2020, it drops to nearly zero. And it stays that way for about 2.5 years. So in other words, the ATO does no court actions, or very, very limited, for 2.5 years. And it's only recently been this year, particularly after the election and the results are in, that what we're seeing is warning letters and followed by the actual director penalty notice coming out. And what that seems to be doing is it's starting to then trigger, one, directors actually paying tax debts. Lo and behold, who would have thought that might be a causation and a reaction? But it's also then triggering those directors that are in a tight jam to actually call their advisors and actually start to get advice on what they should do. And thirdly, we can start to see an increase now in the ATO actually taking court-ordered enforcement.
So the messages are, it's coming. For some people, it's already arrived. And it's a bit like, and perhaps people tell me off for saying, just do something about it. Why don't you? But we've been saying just do something about it for the last 2 or 3 years. So at least something has causing people to act. Yeah. And you've got to get on the front foot as fast. And you see, that's going to be a bit of that'll be a change. Because you like I would say, if you're involved in the insolvency world or you're involved in business crises, the idea that companies not going break, people go, that sounds great. If everybody awesome, who wants lots of companies to go break? Well, not many.
Yeah. But, I gave a speech to a conference of accountants and I said to them, hey guys, just letting you know, over the last 2.5 years, our work dropped 50%. And of course, some smart-ass accountant goes, oh, boo-hoo. And I thought that's an interesting reaction because they obviously look at us as the enemy that they're trying to protect their clients from. But what it was saying to us is that, you can't beat the historical numbers over 20 years of a certain level of corporate failure in Australia, historically, year on year on year on year on year, there is. But when you take that number and carve it by half again, does that mean that every business owner in Australia has miraculously become this awesome weapon of a business owner, and they're just absolutely killing it in business? Or is it just simply no one's pushing or forcing the directors' hands to do anything proactive about the distress that they're in?
And I think we know the answer to that.
We do.
I'm not saying that the Australian businesses are obviously sensational, and most of them are hardworking people who are doing their best and trying to be innovative when they can. But that's not everybody.
Yeah, and typically small business owners and some medium-sized business owners' mindset is very reactionary. So in other words, they only do things when they're forced to do something. Because it's very hard as a small business owner to run your business, run your own marketing, your own books, your own HR, and then all of a sudden now I've got to sit back and think about the strategic vision for my business in 5 years' time. It's a very hard thing to do for small business owners. So of course, if you sort of not got that 5-year vision ahead and where you're kind of heading, you get caught, sometimes by surprise.
And we've also talked about the fact that the smart play is probably not to put everything into your own head. The smart play is to not think that you're the person who knows all the answers. You should seek outside advice, obviously, as cost effectively you can, and from a reputable advisor, not somebody that
I remember
you met
hearing
at a barbecue.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I remember Jeanette said this cracking line.
That's Jeanette Muller, who's been
Jeanette
on before.
Muller, and she said, "A problem shared is a problem halved." And so, as a business owner, you want to take on everything. It's your responsibility. It's your baby. But sharing that problem with someone else, you actually halve the burden, really, because now you've got two people thinking about the issues, and now you've got two sets of minds thinking about how to solve it.
It's funny, we've talked about this before. You like it when you can send somebody away rather so if you put on your advisor hat rather than the liquidator, voluntary administration kind of hat, you can say, like, if you can do this, and this, you've got to, if you can send somebody away, you've got a shot. Do your homework, and hopefully I won't see you again. That sort of, and
has happened. It has happened quite a few times. And it all comes down to a director thinks that the problem is problem A. Then we kind of digest the information and we go, no, I don't think it's problem A. Your issue is problem B. Now, problem B isn't going to be solved by me. It's going to be solved by other experts that I'm familiar with. Go and see them.
Right, so we've talked about this a lot. So here's episode 50, and as I say, we doubled the audience from just the members of our immediate family to quite a large number of people. And we thank listeners around the world who listen in to the sounds of the Baskerville. Okay, one of the audiences that we do talk to are the advisors, the people who are dealing with the director, who might be the accountant who only sees them at tax time, or it might be the person who gets the phone call when the person hasn't done any of the stuff that they ever said that they would, and they phone up in a flurry. So what are our messages to the advisors? Is that in part, and it's not designed to sound self-serving, but it's probably get on the phone to you soon.
Yeah. One of my business partners, Andrew Spring, he said a very good analogy is think about the insolvency practitioner as that specialist club inside the golf bag. Like, if you're going to drive business, use the driver. If you're going to putt for show, use the putter. But if your clients get caught in the bunker, you need a specialist sandwich to get you out.
Okay, right.
We're like the sandwich. So pull out that club and away you go. I think advisors shouldn't look at us as the enemy that they're trying to protect from their clients. Sure enough, that's, you want to keep your clients healthy, cash flow positive, profitable. But don't think about us as the enemy. Think about us as guys you can actually bounce ideas off and say, hey, look, my client's thinking of doing X. What do you think? And I said, well, yeah, you probably could do that, but just think Y is going to happen in 30 days' time and Z is going to happen in 2 years' time. Just be cognizant of that. So, yeah, don't look at us as the enemy. Think about us as that extra specialty club in the golf bag.
And being a non-golfer, I won a 6-pack for the worst round played on the day. It's almost like that. I'm a sailor, so it's kind of that sail you really only need for, in your kit bag that you only need for when things are dicey, but you need to have one that you can reach for if you need to get out of trouble. So, but you don't wait to the last minute to put that up. You sort of,
No.
So yeah, right. So then you go, okay, well, really interesting choices then for directors. Clearly, we've seen a whole bunch of people get into businesses that don't really understand the structure. They then get really held up and hooked into actually doing it. And then they often don't spend enough time on the administration side to actually tidy it up if something goes wrong. Because, I mean, you must have seen in the case of the logistics businesses that we've talked about before, boxes of records. Who owns what? We got no idea. And so it's really hard to try and solve the I'll get round to it problem in the middle of a crisis, isn't it? I mean, that's...
Yeah, very much so, because you're in the middle of a crisis and you got to now... and I'll just give you an example. What used to be decision-making every quarter of the year then got tightened down to, because of a crisis, decision-making every week. So in other words, businesses were going through this pandemic, not knowing what the future looked like. Yeah. Their decision-making had to be week by week, not quarter by quarter, when everything's nice and stable and there's a bit of predictability about how the market goes. This was completely unpredictable times. Unprecedented was the word used a million times.
I heard an analogy of running a business is like holding the head of a snake. I think we've mentioned this one before too, that if you hold the snake by the head, you can control it. But if you hold it by the tail, it can come around and bite you. So there's a real job there to stay on top of a lot of things and really have your hand on the tiller, to use my sailing expression, or make sure that you've got the boat directed away from the sandbar, that sort of thing, or whatever. So we're always going back to the fact that you've got to try and tackle the problem before you hit it. If it hits you, is your business in the right shape to be fixed? Is that possibly the message of the 50th episode, to say if it is a mess, get some help now.
Yeah, get help early.
But even good businesses, like in COVID, we saw a lot of good businesses got hit really hard. So is your business in a good situation so that it can be saved because you're not going through boxes of stuff that you were always going to get round to? Is
your business fit enough to survive, illness? Use that analogy, or is your business fit enough to recover from a hit? Very similar to the human body. We're all fairly fit and we're still alive and the heart's pumping and all that, but occasionally we get sick. Can we survive? Are we fit enough to do that? Or is influenza just going to wipe us out?
Yeah, and that's a fairly dire note, hopefully not. But I think what we've said over the last 50 episodes is, you can go on. You can go on. The person who deals with the issues, they can go on. The business can survive, or the directors' lives can go on, even if the business itself doesn't succeed.
Well, let me put it this way. Your chances of survival increase the earlier you seek help.
That's kind of like life, really, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, okay, on that note. Well, that was episode 50. Went into some dark narrow sort of avenues, but I think that's the lesson, isn't it? We've said seek help early, don't wait for the DPN, and also, are you match fit? Are you ready? Do you have the tools in your kit bag?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Chris.
No worries,
Thanks
James.
for 50.